So this week, the topic is the spiritual practice of encircling. Now, you all have had a little bit of a heads up because, oh, wait, I have my hand over my microphone. You all have had a little heads up because we did a circle prayer a couple of weeks ago. Remember, I read you that circle prayer from David Adams. And what I'm realizing is for years I wrote and organized Celtic liturgies, and I don't know why. I think I should have read this book first, probably, but I didn't know about this book. But how often I use circling prayer in those liturgies, and how often I've seen different forms of circling prayer. In the Native American culture, they call it the prayer of the four winds sometimes, or the prayer of the four corners, or the prayer of the four seasons. But you stand, and you start and you face north, and then you turn a quarter of a turn and you face east, and you turn and face a quarter of a turn and face south, and then you turn and face, you know what I mean? You go and do that whole thing, and you pray for the protection that each of those things affords. So if I can remember this from memory, but like to the north, you pray for the protection of the elements, and then on the east you pray for the new day and everything that is new and everything that is yet to become, right? Like the rising of the sun, right? The new day. In the south, you pray for
Forgiveness.
And romance and love and those you love, and the time to connect with that. And then on the other side, you pray for what has been. You pray for your on the west, pray for your ancestors, pray for what has gone before, and then you make that full circle. And that is in some ways what the prayers that she's talking about in this, the Keem prayers, CAIM, Keem, like Kim, mostly, maybe Kim is a better way to say it, that are so prevalent in the starting with Druid culture, moving into Celtic culture, and now throughout so many things. But we know that has been that circling prayer. So how many times has anybody ever seen someone like with a house blessing or at a wedding where they'll do the blessing where someone will sprinkle something around the house all the way in a circle around the couple? Has anybody ever seen that?
I think
Maisie's shaking her head.
Yeah, we did a different kind of circling prayer. When her son was going for a job interview, she actually went down to the building that he was in, and she drove around it praying the whole time for him.
Right, that's a good circle prayer.
Or that's a helicopter parent. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a cool way to do it too. Absolutely.
Like the chalk piece that they gave us at Vietnam church, and a little prayer thing to walk around your house, and mark your house for blessings and stuff like that. And then the Jewish people always have a blessing thing on their home, but this was something we all did, and they kept everybody going around their houses praying to bless them. So I guess it's the same thing.
I think it's very similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look back on what we've already learned in the last 5 weeks, this would just be another type of prayer, another type of spiritual practice that would connect us to the present moment, right? It would bring our intentions that we have for a healthy life, a good marriage, a job, the promise of a job, the blessing on your house, the blessing on a person. That would just bring that into the present moment, right? That just brings whatever that intention is. It's not just something we're thinking about, but sometimes that, when we talked about thresholds, it brought it into the present moment. And I think this encircling prayer in that way brings it into the present moment, and it articulates something that might be vague. It might be something we're feeling or something we're concerned about or something we care about, but it might be vague, right? And then if you have this opportunity to articulate it, then doesn't that make it more in the present moment for us? So her example of the Lorica. Good morning, Lawson. Are you guys home?
Glad to see you back, Lawson.
She doesn't hear us.
Yet.
Yes, I
Good
think
morning.
she's
Are you back home?
Barely.
Hey, Lawson. Okay. In body only. I got it. Okay. Well, you can see that I'm zooming from home because the power's been out here and I can't get out of our gate. So, it's fine. Thank goodness for Zoom, I guess. But I don't have my notes and, but you know me, I'll find something to talk about. So we were just talking about the intentionality of a circling prayer, encircling, and that her example that is the Lorica, which is like a shield, right? It's the Gaelic word for like a shield or a protection. She says, if we think about, is it, like Ephesians, you put on the breastplate of rice and the whole armor of God. And it probably goes as far back, as those letters that Paul wrote and that kind of way of thinking, but the desert fathers and mothers, when they retreated into quiet places, these are the kind of prayers they prayed for protection. Why would that be important? Well, we live in places where we are continually, I'm overprotected today, aren't I? My gate is keeping me overprotected. But we have a house around us. We wear clothes. We have heat and air conditioning. We are protected. We don't live in the elements. I think the quote from what she or maybe her husband wrote was that I remembered. So, when you had to rely only on fire as your protection, and maybe your own cleverness, but that would be it, right? You did not have all the protections. How many of you have ever gone camping?
Yeah.
Right? And even if it's 100, I build a fire. I mean, what
I know.
the fire is not for warmth or even for cooking because we have a Coleman stove. So that's not it, but somehow the fire adds that layer of protection. So how much more then do prayers add to that layer of protection? They just add to that. And this is that idea of encircling prayer. And saying with intention for what we pray. I'm trying to remember that David Adams prayer, but many of the Celtic prayers go like this. Keep fear without and keep love within. Keep whatever it is you guys could add a line to this, right? We can go around the room and add a line. What is it that you would like to keep afar?
Worry.
Worry.
Yeah.
Keep worry afar. Anything else?
Well, anxiety, I guess that's about the same.
That's one for you. Okay. Anxiety, worry, fear, danger,
Fatigue.
fatigue.
Can you throw
Today
that?
for you. What, Kate?
Selfishness.
Can you, is like bad health?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the intention, keep bad health away, keep even bad thoughts away.
Self-centeredness. Anger.
Yeah, so many things we could, that list would be very long. And then what would be the corresponding gift that we would want to receive? You know, keep anxiety away, keep patience near, keep, fear away, keep love near, whatever you think of that. And it would be, it's not like there's a formula. That's not the point of this, that that it's formulaic. It's formulaic, in the fact that it would help you isolate, help us isolate.
That's when I would say St. Patrick's breastplate.
Yeah,
Christ with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left.
that is that's her example as well, St. Patrick's. And what is that we
Christ
yeah.
before me. Oh, it's just wonderful.
Right? And it's called the breastplate of St. Patrick's, right? This armor that we put on.
So
I did have a handout. I had a handout for you all that was the words from the prayer book. Her words were, I arise this day, I think, and in the prayer book, it's I bind unto myself this day.
Oh, yeah.
But same, you get I think you get the idea of it. But there was a thing that had laid out the whole hymn and then put scripture references beside each of the verses and each of the lines, which I just thought was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And sometimes we think, well, this isn't about anything. This is, or people might say that to you. They might say, well, isn't this from a tradition before Christianity? Or is this really Christian? Or I don't understand, and Patrick was born into a Christian family, right, in Britain, a Roman Christian family. And then, so it wasn't that the words that are attributed him, but they existed before he claimed them. Right? This is the culture into which he was born. These were practices of the people into which he came. When he went back and to do his ministry, his work among the people of Ireland, when he did that work, this would have been the kind of prayer that they would have already been saying. They would have already been looking for the protection of the Creator in their lives, to surround them and be before them and after them and with them and in them and all the ways that is. So it's just this and then what is the spiritual message for everyone about encircling prayer? Is there something? Is there a deeper? And we can talk about the structure of the prayer and the history of the prayer, but what is what is the way that this prayer lines up with your life? What is the way this prayer?
I think it lets us know that God is the God of the present moment. And so God's presence is always with us. He's not playing hide and seek. He's there for us. We just look and grab him.
It's like being held by God. Just
Being the circle. Yeah. Thank you all.
compressed.
Yeah.
For being in the womb of God.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Having just been there and walked around St. Patrick's grave and touched it, and the other two saints that were with him, all buried together in the original one. It's a big
That's
thing.
right. You just came from Ireland, didn't you?
I didn't see it. And the highlight of the trip was, for me, was to go out there to the countryside where, in Ireland, where actually, I haven't had the pictures developed, so you don't have to be bored with those, but of the actual first church that he had built, very small, but they still use it. And he's buried outside. They had to bring his body back. I mean, it's some long story. They talk about bringing his body all the way back, and then they had to find the other two because they promised all three would be buried together. But it's a very plain art place. It's not like St. Pat's, when you go to the big one. It's you had feet, they were like, it sounds weird, but they were like, I felt spirits around, like I kept thinking about all the people, including him that had been there,
Mhm.
and that's what always, it was amazing to be there.
It reinforces the idea of, too, Kate, I think of pilgrimage, as a way to, or thin places, or, just whatever it is that, where God looks for ways to touch us, to break through what we think we know, to help us, in that moment, to hold and remember, to trust. When we say we venerate a saint, it means much more than worship them. I think it means that we take into ourselves what were those principles who they were and what they practiced and what they did. That's what we're venerating, in a sense. That's the important part for us, that these are people who listened intently to God's message. And what does she call it? That followed their place of resurrection. Right? They went to that place of resurrection to know where they would be reborn. And so when Patrick, and I think it's Columba, and who else is the third one, Kate, that Bridget. So they're all there together because they shared that. Two of them went somewhere else. Bridget kind of moved a bit, but not a lot, but remained true to what God had called them to. Again, story after story of the saints that she has chosen in the book reflect that clearly. I think that's probably why she chose them. But
it struck me reading the book, and I can't put it into any of his words or anything, but just the idea that excuse me, he was wrestling with some lack in himself that he needed and wanted, and knew God wanted to fill, and he wasn't able to get there. And that's when he went to the desert, went to the to be alone and pray for a long period of time, and because that was so essential and important that he be able to get in touch with that thing that he knew God had for him or wanted from him, or I don't know, I can't put it into any of their words.
Well, I think he did, because the decision was he went back to the land where he had been held as a slave.
Right.
Like that would be the last place you would go.
Right. Yeah.
It's the last place I would want to go, I think.
And then
where he was most humble and most fragile, and God, God's presence with him. It was just because I feel that lack in myself, and I think, in what way would I be willing to take that so seriously that I would go to the wilderness and be alone for years until until God was able to get through to me or whatever. It just,
Or
it's,
to go to that place, like the words you used were where you would be the most vulnerable.
mm,
Because what is our self, preservation, our self-protective nature would be to go in the opposite direction of that.
mm,
And that wasn't, I mean, he went there, but then he faced all kinds of things. I mean, when he was involved in battles. He was involved, people were killed because they decided to become Christian then. I mean, he witnessed some of that. And I would imagine there were times when he might have thought, did I hear right? Did I did I get the call right? Is this really what was supposed to happen? But I think that's so true. Thank you, Maisie, because I do think for us to go to the place where we might be vulnerable is hardest. And now we've heard that
to just lay ourselves bare, to put down all our own false protections, and to truly seek all that God has for us, and get ourselves out of the way in ways that in our busy lives we can avoid. We long for it, and yet we protect ourselves from it. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm wondering in our own culture, what would be an equivalent? How could we do that? How could we do some equivalent thing where we truly committed ourselves to focus on the essence of what it is all about, and what God, how He wants to come into our and be in control and be all the things we long for, and yet,
I mean, I guess we do what we see that those of old have done, right? What did they do? They went off by themselves.
And how can we do that?
Right? How do we do that? Do we set aside some time every day to do that? Right?
And that's making the decision over and over and over, which is hard. Rather than making the decision once and going to the wilderness and staying there.
But then he had to come back. Do you know? I mean, this is the thing. I mean, like Brendan and Gobnet got on a boat with no oars, but eventually that boat landed somewhere. And they had probably found the boat and the wandering to be as comforting as getting off the boat. So eventually they had to get off the boat. So it's the both and of that. Or maybe it's more than two parts, but it is the time away to hear God's voice in whatever way that would be.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, what keeps coming to my mind, and when I lived in Charleston, there was a place about an hour and a half away, or some in some little, I don't know where, a priory, and there were monks, who made the bread and made the meals, but they had these little hermitages in the woods, these little houses where you could go and be totally alone, and I did that for a weekend. And this is embarrassing to say, but I think when I think back on it, I spent the whole weekend in that hermitage naked. I just stripped everything off, and I can't say I had any great, huge awakening at that time, but I was trying to bear myself to receive. Maybe I need to do it again.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going on retreat next week, so let's do it.
I'm not going naked.
No, clothes aren't optional, clothes are necessary.
Yeah.
Right. Clothes are
Well,
necessary.
That I guess that
I-
was about as symbolic as I could,
Yeah.
I could get. Anyway.
We practice that, and in each of the exercises that she has at the end of these chapters, I believe are other ways for us to get in touch with that, other ways to think about silence, the experience of being outside, that God is there and present in those moments. I think, the Bible studies that her husband writes, those are all ways, I think, beautiful ways that we can practice hearing God's voice in our lives, not apart from it in some ways, because going off and being in a hermitage or being in the desert or being whatever it is on our boat, but not everybody can do that. I mean, yes, of course, everybody could do that in some way, and yet I think you all want me to show up for church on Sunday. Also, you also want me to do some other things. So, there's that. And so the practices, if it's saying an encircling prayer that you write, noticing where you are and what's keeping you from doing something else, or that might be standing in the way, or something you wish you had more of, or what, I don't, it's hard to know. So we would just, invite that practice of the prayer, even, and the writing of that, and the remembering of that, and the saying of it. The repeating of St. Patrick's breastplate, I think out loud, because I can tend to drift when I'm reading something silently to myself. But reading it out loud, not once or twice, maybe 7 or 8 or 10 times. We think repetition, I think, gets a bad rap often, like it gets boring, or you get tired of it, or it loses its power. But I think, to the contrary, when we do Lectio Divina, for example, and we read the scripture 3 times, right, we hear something different every time we read it. Something is more powerful than we imagined it, or didn't even, or a throwaway word, or whatever. We already know that story. I don't have to read it again, I know that story. So, so maybe just reading St. Patrick's breastplate, Maisie. I don't know that that's going to cause you to go back and relive, reimagine, redo some vulnerability in your life. I don't know, right? I don't know that, but I think maybe our first step is that we're just aware of that. We're aware of how much we have tried to avoid some places where we had once been enslaved. I don't know, right? What kind of courage does it take to do that? And what does that look like? Is going to be, again, tiny things? Absolutely. Aren't you always amazed when you read about somebody? I'm always amazed when I read about somebody who's written a book.
Yes.
They wrote down their thoughts and they got them published, and then they're willing to put their name on it so that everyone knows that's what they wrote, right? That doesn't sound like saving the continent for Jesus, but it doesn't, it's small. People who sing a song in front of people, that someone else's or their own, it just amazes me. People who are willing to make a casserole and share it with somebody, same thing. Their food, their life. People willing to listen to other people. and just be an ear. So there's all those ways we do that open us up, to be vulnerable. Someone could say, I hate chicken casseroles. Okay. That's a possibility. I don't know who that person is, but there might be someone. But or I don't like chocolate cake, or I don't like your poem, or please don't sing, or whatever it is. I mean, there's always the possibility that someone's not going to be able to receive what gifts it is that we're offering, and that we have to trust in our offering. Maybe that's through, praying a circling prayer, or reading some scripture prior to it, or rereading St. Patrick's breastplate, whatever it is, before you do it. To know that there are dangers. We need protection, right? And I'm not, there have been times in my life where I have definitely felt the prowling of something not of God. That's true. But mostly I just need the protection of God, to know that God loves me. And that's why God extends God's protection to me. Not vis-a-vis the fact that I'm under attack. That's not how I operate. But to know that God cares enough about me to protect me.
Mm-hmm.
And if anybody grew up in a vulnerable childhood, that makes it harder. It adds sort of a level of like, what, I don't know what protection means. Right. So it's this, we all, it's definitely many times we are on that same journey as these saints of old, the same journey, internally, externally, we're doing the same work. We're doing the same work.
I would like to try to express something that I'm not sure I can, but it's not a situation in my life of vulnerability. It's more like you were saying about being specific about what in general is what you think or feel. I've always felt a love and closeness to nature.
Mm-hmm.
But other than the times when I could go out somewhere fishing or be in a hermitage in the woods, or I sort of get caught up in my life and myself. And but what's been happening about being specific about nature is seeing the things on the ground that are beautiful, and collecting them and making something out of them that brings me close to the real love of the things that I have, that we all, I think, typically overlook and don't realize the beauty. And so just that little act of going around looking on the ground for things that are beautiful and collecting them and then putting together in an art form, or if you will, or whatever. There's some kind of symbolism there that has a lot to do with me. And I think what you're talking about being specific about things that we feel and believe, but don't know how to express or don't do anything with, and they're sort of there. But I don't know, this gives me an opportunity to kind of live it or touch it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah. And how wonderful that you've connected to that right at this moment in your life, and what that might mean, and how, because I don't think we always know. I mean, we are drawn to some things we enjoy or whatever. And I always think it's probably, might be long past, or it might be the near past, but we have to have some space to sort of understand that implication for us. like what God is saying, and to stick with it, not to just have which is what I'm really good at. I'm really good at having like 1,000 aha moments, like, oh, aha. And then like they just go off.
And then they're gone, and you can't even
But
remember.
they're like, those are the God saying, like, could you just pay attention just a little bit? And
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's
there'll be another one, but could we just stay in that and kind of, and, do that reckoning that comes with that aha moment, right?
what it does for me is I just get overwhelmed by, and I call it the whimsy of God. I mean, there are so many beautiful petals or pieces of bark that God didn't have to make. There's no purpose in their beauty other than, a butterfly, a rock that has colors. That He's so whimsical in the things that He put in our world. What a shame not to notice them. And it's just so amazing. I just say, oh God, you made this with all these different colors. For what reason? For me to see it and enjoy it. And it's just a real experience of God's love to me, because there's really no other purpose in it. But
Well, and then for you to share it, right?
Yeah.
So it does have that sort of next step, which is to share it.
Mm.
Not just to share the things, but the creator behind the things, right?
it just
And to be
That's
able to,
gives me such joy, and I hope that it will, in that way, just help us to see the things that are all around us that are so beautiful.
right.
But the gift that you have, Maisie, is the ability to paint or copy all of those beautiful things that are out there, preserve them, and some of us who might not notice those things that God's done outside will see your painting and stop and go, well, look at that. I wonder, where did she see that? How did she do that? And so to me, that's the full circle of the message, is that, there's different parts that have to take place. I mean, I might see something, but as sure as heck I'm gonna paint it, it's not gonna look like something that that would have really shown others what it really is, and given them an aha moment. They may never be by a creek bed, they may never be out in the woods or see those things, or even have them short. But to see something you created when you saw it is part of that wonderful circle the gift you have to share God's gifts with other people.
Well, thank you for that. But we can all do that in so many different ways, and I've just discovered this new way.
It's a visual way of sharing
Other
God's.
people, I'm sorry,
Go ahead, Laura.
people might look at the same things, Maisie, and of course write a symphony.
Oh yeah,
About
yeah,
it.
that's right.
When I listen to music, and some pieces of music, I can just picture so much in my head. And again, it is a circle of, all the beauty that God has made around us.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. And it comes to us through different channels and different ways, but it's just such a joy to have that added thing given in our lives, that our eyes are opened. I call it the eyes of the heart, and I think she calls it that. I thought it was but I see the stuff out there with the eyes of my heart, and as you say, that can happen for each of us in some different way. And but anyway, it's just a new thing for me, to find a way to express that feeling that my brother wrote about and C.S. Lewis wrote about, that longing that we see when we see a beautiful mushroom or something in the wild that is, and it's like you want to take it into yourself and have it, and that's a way to express that. And anyway, I go on too much as usual. Sorry.
Fine. Thank you. So what other observations did anyone have about the reading or your reflection on the reading or anything else that this brought up for you this week?
It's interesting where we have been is a place that Croatia is at war so often. They just move from one group being in charge of them to another. And one of our guides said their grandmother, her grandfather was under the Austrians. Then they were under the Italians. Then they were under Napoleon. Then they were under another group for just 3 months. And then the United States and Britain had to do a protectorate because two of the same groups that just finished war were going to fight again over it. I mean, it is just unbelievable how these people are encircled by war rather than love.
Oh,
So, I mean, just hearing about the circle of protection and all like that, these people haven't been protected. They either started a war or have tried to defend themselves from those who are starting war. And it just makes you realize how fragile life is. And these people really know it. And some of the reasons people go to see their places where they live is because they've built these huge forts on tops of hills with these big walls, and some of the walls haven't been destroyed. But it's just it really brought home to me how fragile our security is too. And how long the world has just keeps on fighting. We just, I mean, we are now allying with Japan. Well, the last war we were against Japan. I mean, it makes no sense. Makes no sense. And I guess we're going to keep doing it till we destroy the earth. And that's this time God's not going to destroy the earth with a flood. We're going to destroy ourselves with bombs. But the good news about that, I guess, that'll be the time of the second coming.
That's right. That's right.
So, but it was just, we are so isolated here in America from war a lot relative to what these people are.
And so much else that's so difficult for people in the world. Hunger and
refugees.
So many things. Homelessness.
All these countries are more impacted by migrations than we are.
Yeah.
And it was made me realize what a bubble we are in. In spite of all that we hear that we are not, we are in a bubble. Maybe not a perfect one or a complete one, but we are.
We have been for so long. I mean, it was idyllic for so long. I mean, even what we're dealing with now is, I don't know, but it's been such an easy culture to live in.
Surrounded by oceans, you can see your protection as something else.
Mhm.
Some people, it's easy to live in. I mean, we say that because, but I mean, I'm sure that there are lots of minorities in this country or different groups of people in this country would not find it, so safe to be.
Right.
I mean, this is not always the safest place.
Sure.
But
There's
even
no
that is
safe-
relative. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's like, I mean, it's funny because I have not ever thought, well, I know I talk about this all the time and I really guess I shouldn't, but I never really thought anything scary about having what they call being half Jewish, but I'm getting more and more conscious of the people that are around or where I'm around or to whom I might speak. And I have cousins, obviously, that are very conscious of, they live in New York and they live in these places where, there's people marching and blowing up their church. I mean, and sometimes I stop and I think, well, what if it was Episcopalians they didn't like? What if for some reason we had to be very careful about telling people that we were Episcopalians? And because people didn't like us because we're inclusive, and that's a threat to them. So, so there are a lot of things in this country itself that can be frightening to those you never think about it being that way, I think.
Yep.
We might be a target for somebody's bomb one day.
Well, I mean, I have a dear friend that is a Methodist bishop. And, she sends me stuff because I am not a Methodist. And what she has been through with what's going on there is like just, what? And she's so thrilled that I think I sent it to Allison, I don't know if she got it or not, but that Charlene had sent out this long thing where they figured out somebody that 1,000 years ago or wherever, that somebody had misinterpreted the wording, and that is what had set up the Methodist Church to be against people who were gay. Because they had used the wrong wording and they put that word in. And anyway, I did send it to Allison and I have it.
You did.
That the Methodist Church, where she's United Methodist, and she's, I'll just get notes from her that will say, I don't understand this. And she said, do they need a bishop in the Episcopal Church? We can always stand a good Episcopalian bishop. But, then my sister's church, Methodist Church in Alabama, were one of the ones that left. Because, and I guess you would think that would be normal being in South Alabama, but, and I'm sitting and I'm going, and, she says to me, well, it just has to do with that they want too much money from us. And I think, well, we're related, aren't we somehow related? I know. We grew up in the same house, but, which is what my cousins in New York say, how did you all grow up in the same house? But, things like that are happening in this country that we don't hear about because as of right now, please God, they're not shooting each other. But, there's a lot of big, and I think it was Allison that told me that bad things are happening. Try to think of a good thing that has come out of it. I'm giving you credit for that because I think you're the one who told me that. And the funny thing is, one good thing that I thought of all this was the church that I go to in Florida we don't have any, we have maybe 20 people in this huge church. And we get excited when we get new people. But usually they're homeless people, so it's not, I mean, we're thrilled that they're there, but it's not gonna help the budget much. But with the Methodist having this split and the way it's turned out in Destin, the big Methodist church went with the new Methodist. And these people, the United Methodist has set up little churches around, but these people are too far away to get to them. So we have like 6 new families at the Episcopal Church that are excited to be there because it's a home for them. And they've taken over some responsibilities. And, for those of us who've done the same over and over there, trying not to get the bishop to sell it. And so out of all the turmoil and the awfulness, maybe the church, will have.
That was the good thing to come out of something maybe not good. I think sometimes our own awareness about a circumstance, to go back to Lawson's, awareness about where she was and what they were seeing, is that, it's to identify with someone's pain, a culture's pain, a people's pain. Also there is sometimes can lead to despair, in that, but the other part is that they have survived. Some part of them is able to tell the story so that you could hear it. That sounds super white people way of seeing the world, probably. Sorry. But yet, you're not going to be the same person you were before you went. You're just not. The whole, so, yeah. And I hope that each of these, or some of these, or one of these spiritual practices that we're in learning about, practicing, will help us, right? Like, give us some way to not feel despair, but still feel hopeful. And I don't mean hopeful like, oftentimes hope can feel like, oh, everything's going to be fine. That kind of, my mother's kind of hope. I mean like the kind of hope that comes from Jesus, right? And with Jesus and with our understanding of how God uses all things for good, we hold on to that God uses all things for good, even the crappiest ones. And maybe not in our lifetime. And it's not a reason to excuse people's behavior, and that those two things are not related at all. They're not. I don't want people to hear me saying, well, it's okay because God's going to make it all right. It's not okay. It's not okay for people to be hurtful to one another or to harm each other, whether that's individually, culturally, groups of people, whatever it is. That's not okay. We know that. We read scripture to learn who our neighbor is and how we're supposed to act. So we know that, but we also know that God will, I think, beloved, our trust has to be in God, right? Using us to do what we need to do, all that stuff, yes, but in God, that God will make all things right.
I've got to go.
Okay. Good to see you, baby. Bye.
Love being back. See you soon.
We'll see you soon. Okay, y'all, we have like 5 minutes left, and I think I have to cancel class for next Thursday because most of us will be at Lake Logan for the Daughters of the King retreat. So we will do 2 chapters on the following week, right? We will do chapter 7 and 8 on the following week, which is
Okay.
okay. I apologize for that, but my lack of planning sometimes becomes evident to y'all.
It's all okay.
Sometimes I'm able to
That's
keep it on the down low.
Right.
Anything else that anybody wants to say? If you do get to church today, I'm going to try to be there. And if you get to church and there isn't anyone there, please just go in the refrigerator and make yourselves lunch. That's,
Only people here are Ginger and myself.
right.
So
And Ellen.
We can do that.
All right, babies. All right. Okay. Go in peace. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord, and read over St. Patrick's breastplate when life gets a little bit harder than it should be. All right.
Thank
Thank you all.